Okay, all right. So we have defined the state, we have defined the nodes as well, and now we're going to define the workflow. All right. And so, firstly, this workflow is nothing but you can think of this workflow as we are going to bring the state and the nodes together, and then we're going to execute all of it together. Okay, as in now. We're going to create a graph. The LangGraph, the name itself contains graph, right? So that is what we're going to do here. Yeah, so basically this module that we're going to build, which is the workflow module, this defines the DAG. Okay, and DAG is nothing but it is directed acyclic graph. Okay, and what does it do? That orchestrates the video compliance. Okay, a video compliance audit process. This is what it does. Okay, and it basically connects the nodes, okay, which are using the state graph. What is state graph? I'll explain that to you in a while. Okay, from LangGraph. All right, that is what it does. All right. So the logic here is pretty. This is graph. Okay, the logic here is pretty straightforward. So we're going to start at the start node. Okay. Once we start, then it hits the index video node. This node it hits. Okay. After that, it is going to hit the audit content node. Okay, and after that we're going to end the graph. Okay, if you see, there are just two things happening, but because obviously it is such a big project. If you look at the main functionality, there are just two nodes, but both of them are extremely robust, right? So what we're going to do is from LangGraph, dot graph. Okay, I'm going to import state graph. LangGraph.graph. Yeah, I'm going to import state graph and I'm going to import end. We can also import start, but that's fine. Okay, and now from backend.src dot graph dot state, which is your state.py code, we're going to import the video audit state that is there. Okay, and then from backend.src dot graph dot nodes, we're going to import what? We're going to import the index video node, and we're going to also import the audio content node. These are the two nodes that are important right now. Okay, what we'll do is we'll now create a function which creates the graph, okay, for us. All right, and what this does is that it basically constructs and compiles the LangGraph workflow. Okay, so constructs and compiles the LangGraph workflow. This is what it performs. Okay, and it returns. What does it return? It returns a compiled graph. Okay, which is nothing but a runnable graph. Okay, or I would say a runnable graph object which helps us in execution. Okay, first and foremost, what we're going to do is we're going to initialize the graph with the state schema. Okay, so initialize the graph with state schema. Okay, this basically ensures that all the nodes will adhere to the video audit state. So what we'll do is I'll create a workflow here. Okay, and inside the state graph, I'll just call this particular state. Okay, which is, we'll make sure that every node in our LangGraph or in our workflow that abides by the video audit state. Okay, once this is done, we're going to add the nodes. Okay, and all right, so what we'll do is we'll just add it to the workflow. So I'll just say workflow.add node, and the indexer node. Okay, I'll take this index video node and I'll call this as indexer node. Similarly, I'll again take workflow.add node and I will take the audit content node and I'll call that as auditor node. Okay, Once this is done, what we're going to do is we're going to define the edges. And what are the edges? Edges are nothing but the connections between the two nodes, right? And edges will define which nodes to execute, right? But I think before that, we also need what we'll do one thing is before adding the edges, let's do one thing. Let us also define the entry point. Okay, entry point as in from where do we want our graph to start. Okay, so let's say we'll keep that as indexer node. Okay, so I'll just say workflow dot set entry point, and I'll set this to the indexer node. And now let us define edges. So in workflow, I'll just do add dot edge, and I'll add the edge between indexer and auditor. Okay, which means first the indexer node will work, then the indexer node will pass the state to the auditor node, and then the auditor node will work. So it is kind of linear in fashion. Okay, all right. And then what I'll do is then I so once the audit is complete, the workflow ends, right? As simple as that. So I'll just say workflow dot add edge. Okay, I'll say workflow dot add edge, and then from auditor it will end. Okay, so after workflow it is sorry, from indexer it will go to auditor, and then from auditor it will end the graph. Okay, and after this what we'll do is we will basically compile the graph. Okay, so I'll just say workflow dot compile. Okay, and what this will do is this will compile the graph, and what will we return? We'll return the app, which is nothing but the compiled object. And then what we'll do is we'll basically expose this runnable app. Okay, by import API, by the import, I mean import by the API, CLI, whatever. So I'm going to just call the function that we have created here. We basically going to invoke this function and store this in app variable. Okay, so this is a simple code that we are going to define for workflow, wherein we are building or we are bringing everything together. Okay, now if you look at this thing called as state graph. Now state graph is actually the main tool from LangGraph that is used to build stateful workflows. Now please understand, LangGraph is stateful, right? Which means the entire state gets shared across the entire workflow, right? As simple as that. And when I say end is nothing but it is basically, you can think of this as a special marker that tells the graph that the work is done and the graph needs to be finished here. Okay, video audit state is nothing but, I mean, if you can recall, we have already defined this earlier, and these are the two nodes that we will be using. Okay, we start with a function called as create graph. You can also think of this as a graph constructor or something, and what it does is basically it creates a new empty graph object which is called as workflow. Okay, that is what we're going to do here, and this basically enforces, now what you have done here, this is basically enforces some strict data rules. Okay, it basically tells the graph that every node in this workflow, okay, every node, which is which node, the auditor node and the indexer node, so every node in the workflow must accept and return the data that matches the video audit data structure, video audit structure. Okay, and if the node tries to return some random data, the graph will throw an error, as simple as that. Okay, then to the workflow we add both of these nodes and we give them this nicknames. Okay, the indexer and the auditor. All right, and from now on, once we have defined this, from now on, basically the graph doesn't care about the complex Python function names. It basically refers to indexer function as indexer node and audit content node function as auditor, as simple as that. Okay, and then we define entry point. Entry point is basically when, so basically it basically means that when my graph will start running, it will first run the indexer node, and that is nothing but set entry point. Okay, so every graph needs a clear beginning, right? Without this, the system would not know which function to trigger first, and this is that beginning. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're going to add an edge. Okay, edge, if you see, this is nothing but a direct path that we're creating. Okay, this basically says that immediately once you are done with the indexer, Okay. You send the data to auditor, and once the data is sent to the auditor, once the entire process is done, you stop or you end the graph. Okay. And this basically automates the handoff, right? So you don't need to write the code manually to pass the transcript from one function to the another, right? The graph will handle this data transfer automatically by using the edge. So data will be transferred from indexer to auditor, then from audit after auditor, it will basically end the graph. As simple as that. Okay, and this is where you kind of finish it. Okay, finally, what do? We are going to compile the graph. Okay, and we return the app. So workflow.compile, where we compile the entire workflow and we return it. This basically takes all the definitions or whatever we have created above, which is nodes, edges, states, all of that, and it will freeze into a runnable application. That is what it will do. All right. So workflow, this thing that you see, workflow, it is just a plan. You can think of this as a draft or a plan, a simple plan. Okay. App is an executable item or an executable machine, which means when we compile that project, then it becomes something that can be executed. Okay, or something we can run. Okay, and dot compile will check for errors. It will check for disconnected nodes, and it basically prepares the graph to run. All right. And then finally, what do? We basically run the function just how we have defined, and that saves the result in the app variable. Okay. And yeah, so basically this is the variable that we are going to, whether that will be importing in server.py file and main.py file. Okay, so this is the workflow module that we have created for, or the graph module that we have created for the LangGraph. All right. Okay, now let's proceed with the next part.